I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Clayton Allen, the U.S. director at Eurasia Group. Clayton, thanks so much for coming on once again.
Thanks for having me on.
As we sit here right now, it has been 1,000 days since Russia first invaded Ukraine. And over the weekend, President Biden made a pretty historic move. He signed off on allowing Ukraine to hit Russia with U.S.-supplied long-range missiles. This is for the first time. So what's your reaction to the news? What do you make of this? How big of a deal is this move?
I think there's a couple of things worth noting. This has been some time in the making. This is not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It's been discussed within U.S. policy circles for quite a while at this point. It's also worth noting that the U.S. didn't exactly give Ukraine free rein to do exactly what it wants. Ukrainian strikes into Russian territory are heavily dependent on U.S. targeting data and intelligence sharing. The U.S. is very tightly controlling that information and using that to exercise some moderation or some influence over what targets Ukraine's actually able to strike. Similarly, the U.S. is giving permission for use of ATACMS, U.S.-provided long-range missiles, for strikes into Russia. This hasn't opened the door for Ukraine to use other Western-provided systems for the same purpose.
So it's not free rein. There's restrictions. There's some strings attached here. So how big of an escalation do you think this is in this conflict?
I think that this is one of kind of a series of step escalations. This is not necessarily that different to the decision to provide Western aircraft or the decision to provide heavy armor. Certainly it's an escalation, but it's an escalation that's not happening in a vacuum. We've seen Russia respond to prior expansions of U.S. military or Western military aid with threats of greater Russian offensive action, threats of greater Russian activity. Certainly you've seen Putin respond in this manner by changing the threshold for use of nuclear weapons, though in our view, Russia is still very likely to skew more towards responses that meet sort of the level of escalation that the U.S. has exercised, i.e. Russia's response will be proportional and likely relatively limited.
I want to talk about that a little bit because Putin reportedly revised the country's nuclear doctrine here. And essentially what it laid out was that if a country is aided by nuclear power attacks Russia, Russia will view that as a combined attack from both countries. So what message specifically is Russia sending to the United States with this?
Message here is that Russia is upping its potential ability to respond. It's upping its perceived aggression. Our view is that this doesn't meaningfully change, at least for now, the likelihood that Putin actually uses nuclear weapons. We still have it as a low risk, a 5% tail risk in our estimation. There are other things Putin could do that would change that estimation. If he starts to move forces related to the deployment of nuclear weapons, starts to make efforts to preemptively station or stage nuclear weapons, those would all change what we estimate the real threat to be. This was really a policy change that I think was intended to put Russia on a more forceful or aggressive footing.